I believe in connecting. We all do it. We all need it. And we don't get enough of it. So in the spirit of we don't get enough of it, I'd like you to stand up, go find someone you don't know, and connect. You have 2 minutes. We all do it. We all connect. Your first connection is at birth. The first thing the doctor does is hand you to your parents so they can count your fingers and toes and look into your little blue eyes and make sure that everything's safe and good, and they connect with you. It's your first connection. And whether it's conscious or unconscious, we all connect all the time. One of the funny things that people ask me is how I connect people at my co-working space. And I'm going to let you in on a huge secret right now. This is how it goes down. Sally, meet Doug. Doug, meet Sally. Sally just moved to Austin. And then I walk away. And they usually have about a 20-minute conversation. And that's all it took. We all need connections, but it's not all babies and fun and games. The worst punishment, besides death, is solitary confinement. What is solitary confinement? It's the loss of all connection, especially all human connection. Another problem in our society is depression and loneliness. And what is that? It's when you stop connecting. It's when you draw the blinds and curl up into the fetal position and stop answering your phone or getting the mail. It's when you shut everybody off. And probably the best thing you could do would be to actually connect with somebody. It might make you feel better. We don't do enough. And now all of y'all are thinking, hold on. I've got my cell phone, I've got my iPad, I've got my Air, I'm connected all the time. I'm always connecting. Well, yeah, you're connecting with a device. You're not connecting face to face. And I don't care if Skype becomes 3D, it is not the same as connecting face to face. Nothing, absolutely nothing can replace face-to-face communication. And that communication is key, and that communication is important. And one of the things that I've noticed, I've had over 15 interns at Link. And one of the things I've noticed is that I have to teach them how to make eye contact. I have to teach them how to walk towards somebody with their hand out because they're so used to doing this. In fact, I almost got run over a couple of times this morning walking here because there were students who were looking at their device, not at where they were going. And here's another thing. You got up this morning. You hopefully took a shower. And you came here. You know why? Because you want to connect. Because this is important. And as there's a fundamental shift in the way people are choosing to work, by working independently and being freelancers, and in the words of my sweet nephew, William, who said, "Nobody wants a gold watch anymore, Aunt Liz." People are working differently, but they're being sent home and they're isolated, and we need connection. This is why conferences are on the rise all over the world, because you want to connect, and you want to connect face to face. So I'm going to tell you my story through the lens of connection. I moved to Austin and went to Westwood High School in my junior year. I then moved to College Station, Texas, and went to Texas A&M. I graduated in 1991 with a degree in journalism. I realize some of you probably weren't even born then. And after I graduated, I worked for a small reseller, a kind of would-be Michael Dell. And I lost every deal to a little company in Austin called Dell. And so I'm a big believer in if you can't beat them, join them. So I moved to Austin specifically to work for Dell. And when you start looking for a job, what's the first thing you do? You look for a connection. So I started telling people that I was going to work for Dell. At the time, Dell had around 6,000 employees. They now have over 60,000. And so it was my mom who found a connection for me. Our real estate agent's son was working at Dell on the phones. So we got my resume to Jeff Pratt, and Jeff got it to a manager at Dell, and that was good. But I didn't think that was enough. I needed more connection. And at the time, Dell was headquartered at the Arboretum. And there was exactly one restaurant by the Arboretum, TGI Fridays. So I got a job there. And I wore the striped shirt, and I had flair. And I waited tables there because I knew that the HR director was eventually going to come in there on a job interview, and I was going to hopefully be waiting on his table or know somebody else who knew I was looking for him, and I get introduced to him. Well, it happened. And so I told him why I was there and what I was doing, and luckily he wasn't completely freaked out. And he called me a day later and let me know that I would be receiving a job offer from Dell and that he had nothing to do with it, but if he were to have something to do with it, he would have recommended that they hire me immediately just for my tenacity. So I started working on the 1-800 number. And the 1-800 number was called 1-800 by Dell. But it was really by direct, because what Dell was doing, yes, they were revolutionizing the manufacturing process, but they were putting you in direct contact with the end user. So one minute I was talking to a grandma, and the next minute I was talking to a CEO, but I was talking to the customer. There was no middleman anymore. And that was what really revolutionized Dell, was the connections they were making. So I worked my way up at Dell. I became a manager, and one of the things I found was that working in the cube environment wasn't really all that fun all the time. So I formed the fun committee. I know, innovative. And I threw award ceremonies, I had parties, I celebrated birthdays for people, I had cube decorating contests, and I made it fun. But it was time to move on. So I moved to Atlanta, Georgia, because I wanted to be an account executive, because I had looked around and those account executives had it made. They were making about 3 times what I was. They did not live in Round Rock, Texas, and they didn't have management breathing down their neck every minute. So I was like, these guys have got it made. But Dell didn't like to move people out into the field because they usually didn't succeed. So I had to move out at the lowest possible level. But that was okay. So I moved to Atlanta, Georgia, and there was this lovely man named John Wolcott who was training me. And one of the first places he took me was on Peachtree Street. This is Peachtree Street in Atlanta, Georgia. We have lots of those there. And I went to a meeting before the meeting, and I walked into this room, and it had like mahogany walls, and there was an African-American gentleman with white gloves on, and there was another African-American gentleman shining shoes, and I was like looking around for the Confederate flag out front, and I was like, wow, I get why you need the meeting before the meeting, but this place is creepy. And I'm pretty sure the only reason I was allowed in is because I was with a man. So, that was weird. So right after that, I went to New York, and I visited the W Hotel, back when the W Hotel was newish. And I was sitting in the lobby at the W Hotel, and I was looking around at people working and drinking and in this really beautiful lobby. And I went, wouldn't it be really cool if you could mash these two things together, this meeting space and a W Hotel lobby? I kept working for Dell. And then I was in a Starbucks in Alpharetta, Georgia. And this Starbucks was like most Starbucks. It had the uncomfortable chairs. It had the plug position I needed to jockey for. And it had the coffee that was like $5 and over-roasted and a little bit bitter in my opinion. And I was having the meeting before the meeting. And this was about 8 years later. And a lovely gentleman who was also an Aggie and a friend of mine, an executive at Dell, had flown in. And so we were sitting there I was sitting there in the Starbucks, and I started to look around, and I was surrounded by not only my customers, but my competitors. So when Terry got there, it was like I bought him his $5 cup of coffee, and we sat down. I was like, okay, so here's the deal. Can't mention any product names, any customer names, any dollar amounts, or any numbers. And Terry looked at me, and he said, Liz, how the fuck are we supposed to have a conversation? And I was like, that's a great point, Terry. And as an added bonus, I know it makes me odd, but I hate show tunes. And so they're blaring show tunes, because this is back in the day of selling CDs. And then right, like on cue, Susie has like a level 5 meltdown because mommy won't buy her the butterfly frosted cookie she wants. And I just looked around and I was like, why are we accepting this? Why is this okay to have to work in this environment? So I'd had a lovely career at Dell. I know you don't hear that a lot, but I really did. And when Dell was #1 in the world, I had risen to be one of the top performers at Dell. But also during this time, I was lonely, I was isolated, and I was bored. Because when I wasn't at my customers, I was in my basement working. And believe it or not, I miss the office. I missed going to lunch with people. I miss cake. I miss birthday parties. I miss seeing what people were wearing. I miss bitching about hold times. There was nobody to bitch with. My cat didn't care. So I left Dell. And I moved to Italy. And I tried to be an Italian housewife. And I thought I would look like this. But I did not. So I moved to Austin, Texas. Why Austin? Because I love the entrepreneurial support that you get in Austin, Texas. I like that we're still trying to keep it weird. My family was here. This was what felt like home. It's where I wanted to start my business. So I moved here in 2008. And I started doing research. I visited over 25 co-working spaces in the country. I went to LA, I went to New York. I called up co-working owners from around the country and even the world to talk to them about their space and questions I had. I wrote a business plan, and then I rewrote it, and then I wrote it again, and then I rewrote it, and then I wrote it again. And I did that 17 times. I did a lot of research into demographics to figure out where my space needed to go. And 3 years ago this week, I opened Link Coworking with the tagline, bringing people together. And this talk had me looking back and thinking about connections. And what I figured out was that connections are key. I had been connecting all along and just doing it without even thinking about it. And then I started thinking about how I was connecting people in Link. And so I started with just inside Link. And then I started connecting inside the Village Shopping Center. I called up my friends at Body Business and was like, hey, can we work together on some promotions? And so I connected within the shopping center. Then I started looking at that area of town, and I'm actually actively working on rebranding that area of town Nobu for North Burnett, so we can be the SoCo of the North. And I connect in Austin as well. I occasionally call up the other co-working operators, and I'm like, hey, you guys want to go bowling and drink beer? And they do. And I also bring together sometimes the co-working spaces. We've challenged people to softball tournaments and done some fun things in connecting in Austin. And I connect on a national level as well. 2 years ago, I helped found, and I've been the president for 2 years of the League of Extraordinary Co-working Spaces, where we allow our members to travel to other spaces around the country and have kind of the same experience that they're used to. So you can go to Grind in New York, or you can go to Burrow in Miami, or you can go to Blank Spaces in LA. Last week, I launched the National Co-working Association called CoShare. So I got together 9 of the other leaders in the industry, and we formed a board, and we now have a National Co-working Association. But that wasn't enough. I needed to connect globally. So 2 years ago, I put on the Global Co-working Unconference Conference, and that is my ode to Stephen Colbert, the ridiculous name. And we throw the largest co-working conference in the world. The last 2 years, it's been here in Austin, and I just announced yesterday that we'll be moving to Kansas City, Kansas in 2014. This year, we had over 315 people from around the world in Austin for Juicy, and the Juicy conference had less than 10 people from Austin. They were from all over the world. And that's a picture from Juicy. So for me, connections are success. I now understand the power of connecting. And because I connect on a global scale, the New York Times actually called me for a quote. And I can call anybody in the world to talk about Juicy or co-working. And the crazy thing is, you all have the exact same skill that I have. You have an innate ability to connect. And in fact, what you did in those 2 minutes is you made a connection. The first thing you do is start looking for those connecting points. You all have Austin in common, but I bet you found that somebody else has a job, or somebody you know, or they run at Town Lake at the same time, or you both love bacon donuts. So it's all about connections. So if I, in 3 years, have been able to be a global influencer in this amazing co-working movement, what can you do with your connections? Thank you.